Hey, what's going on, parents? Welcome back to Teenager Tuesday, part 3, with Rhett Smith, talking through depression and anxiety. And for the last 2 weeks, Rhett, we've really kind of talked about reframing it and kind of some overarching perspectives of it. And this week, I think it'd be great to get down to some nuts and bolts.
Yeah, I was thinking about two things. Like when you think about anxiety, depression, I think one, it's critical to identify like the root, what's going underneath. Because I would classify anxiety and depression more as a symptom. It's something I do. I become anxious or depressed because something underneath is happening. And then two, like it stinks to have anxiety and depression. So let's talk about some tools to manage.
Yeah.
And so I thought I'll just keep this short, but a short story for myself. It wasn't, I've been anxious my whole life, and it wasn't until I had a really good therapist to help me understand that like anxiety was really caused by a deep fear of like inadequacy and like not being good enough, not measuring up. And when that was identified for me, I was able to kind of heal that and really do a lot of deep work around that.
Yeah.
And so I think, kids who are struggling with anxiety and depression, you're seeing it by their behavior and the anxiousness and depression. But what you want to do, what we talked about earlier, in creating that safe place, I think, is be a curious parent, volunteer leader, and ask a lot of questions about like, hey, what's going on? What are you feeling? And if you're listening well, I think you pick up on key words. Like I feel like I'm not enough. I feel alone. I feel like I'm inadequate. I feel like I'm unloved. Or sometimes I have kids journal, and they allow me to read their journal. And the journal is like, it's full of information. And so I think we want to identify the roots and not just stop at the symptom. That's really critical. Sometimes, a therapist or counselor can help you do that, but parents and leaders are equipped to like engage in that conversation and really listen. And I think when you get that level, people feel really heard, and you can understand maybe like what's going on and how do we move forward from there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And I love the journaling aspect too.
Yeah.
I do that myself. Like I journal even to just pay attention in services because it helps me just kind of get out of my head and get on paper. And then sometimes like I won't even realize that something I'm thinking is like when I put it on paper, then I'm like, oh, that's okay. That makes sense, and that's not from me, and that's not true, or whatever.
It externalizes it away from you as something. Oh, this is something I do. It's not about me. And also like I think about people who are creative or artists, like musicians, painters. Like they leave a lot of clues in terms of deeper stuff, maybe about what's going on underneath. I have kids. They'll bring me their song lyrics. And I'm like, wow, like let's talk about that thing you said. So I think what we want to do is realize. You see anxiety and depression as a parent or a leader or volunteer, but below the surface, there's other things that are going that trigger it, that bring it up.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to get to and talk about to, I think, begin the healing process.
Yeah. So would there be any other ways to kind of get to that root or maybe manage them with it?
Yeah, and like here's a simple thing. You can Google online like a list of feeling words, right? Or like when you're young kids, they have those little charts like faces, like happy face, smiley face, right? Yeah, and I give a kid a piece of paper and say, hey, circle all the words that you think you feel at times when you're anxious or depressed.
Interesting.
And a kid will circle all these words, and I'm like, oh, okay, let's talk about that stuff. Let's get below. Let's not talk about the anxiety or depression. Let's talk about what's going on there. So I think that's one.
Wow. I want to do that for me.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Keep
Let's
going.
go do therapy right here.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
That's so good.
And it's easy. And it makes them, again, it's a piece of paper, so it externalizes a way of something like this is what goes on. So that's one. You asked about managing it.
Yeah.
Like there's lots of things. We could be as severe as maybe someone needs to see a doctor and get on some type of medication. I think looking at people's self-care, what are they doing physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually to take care of themselves? That's really critical, especially movement of body is really critical in releasing positive chemicals to the brain that help us emotionally regulate, that help with anxiety and depression. I'll tell you what
Get them out of their rooms is what
out of
you're
their
saying.
rooms.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what I've done the most probably, especially during COVID, is I've really doubled down on just simple breathing exercises. I believe God put us in a body.
Yeah.
Our very life is connected to our breath. There's a lot of talk in the New Testament about breath, like, pneuma and ruah. Ruah, I can't even say the Hebrew right. And so we are intimately connected to our breath. And when we get anxious, you'll notice people stop breathing. It gets shallow. And so just stopping and doing some simple breathing exercises, or you can Google box breathing. I'm a huge fan of the Headspace app, and just walking through some breathing meditation stuff, I think is really great.
Yeah. The breathing thing has been big for me. Like you advised me to do that a while back, years ago. And that's whenever I have a lot on my mind, or I feel it, or I'm like, or I notice myself getting too fidgety. I just take a deep breath.
What I've noticed as you and I talking here, I'm aware of that I've like not breathing, kind of shallowed. One, because I'm excited, but I'm kind of anxious too. And so I was just tuning in, going, I'm not breathing, and it's as subtle as that. And if I do that long enough, it creates panic actually. And you think about a kid who is in that mode all day long, the anxiety really skyrockets for them.
That makes sense with the short breaths, because maybe even just physically we would feel like we were drowning. It's
if you've ever seen someone have a panic attack, it's very shallow, short breath, can't get air. So the first thing you do is you help them reestablish just deep breathing to kind of ground themselves. And so we want to focus on that throughout the day.
Man, that's good. Are there any other, I guess, physical things that people could do? You talked about getting out of a room, breathing.
I mean, I think if I'm feeling anxiety in the moment, something physical that is almost like disruptive to get your brain off kilter is to get on the floor and do like push-ups or like or like jumping jacks. And maybe you want to close the door so no one's laughing at you. I think that's really helpful. I think going on a regular walk, if you don't want to do like heavy exercise, I think a regular walk rhythm during the week is really helpful in kind of regulating the breath work. That's critical. And again, just you don't have to make it complicated. If I wake up in the morning, just focus on some deep breathing through my nose and then out my mouth, really slow to kind of reset myself.
And one thing that that you helped me see on a physical side of things is I had a year that was just a horrible year for me personally, and it was really tough. I remember coming to you and talking in a session about how hard it was for me to just get out of bed in the morning. And you talked to me about finding little wins, just like small things that really don't take that much effort, but recognizing that what I did was a win. And so I started making my bed in the morning. And I never made my bed before because I'm like, why? I'm going to mess it up anyways. But I started getting out of bed, and I would just make my bed. And for whatever reason, in my brain, I would think, or it would do this thing where it wouldn't take away a lot of feelings, but then I would have this, I guess, added mindset. Well, I did that, so maybe I can do more.
I think that's good. I mean, I think they talk about that as like being if you can find a keystone habit, something simple that you can do, it can really unlock a lot of other things. And if you're struggling with anxiety and depression, you in your mind so much that I think being able to accomplish one thing that you can see that's tangible can give you a lot of confidence just to kind of take the very next step. You know, and that's something you found to do that worked for you. And I think that's part of the conversation with parents is maybe coming alongside their kids and just helping them figure out, hey, I know you're struggling. What is something that I could come alongside and help assist you, or that I could, walk alongside with you that would help you kind of navigate this?
Because that probably that sense of, man, I did something. Helping with dinner. I did something. I don't know. Helping
Which
cook.
is critical when you're depressed. Depressed has this really like flattening effect where you feel like listless. You can't move. Sometimes you can't even function. And anxiety sometimes, there's a lot of overlap, but anxiety has this kind of like almost incessant, you can't stop your mind, you can't stop thinking, all the what if questions. And so anxiety feels, you can feel it in someone like this kind of heightened state. And then depression, you kind of feel this like, whoa, this is heavy kind of, does that make sense? And so just kind of piecing that together, it's a little different. There's some nuances and there's also a lot of overlap. So discerning what's going on is pretty critical as well.
Yeah, man, those are some good nuts and bolts. That's good. Right, man. That's some good practical stuff. That's all for this week. But again, we're going to be back again next week for part 4. So, gosh, I'm excited. This has been so good. Okay, signing off. Always remember, you're not alone. You can do this. God's with you, and so are we. Have a great week.